On the other side of the world from the United States is India. It is a part of the world about which too little is understood on this side of the earth. For many people, India means the Taj Mahal. It's one of the beautiful buildings of the world, built by the great Emperor Shah Jahan in memory of his lovely wife, Mumtaz. And as we see this lovely structure, we are reminded of an important period of history in India called the rule of the Mughal emperors. And of that period, there are many reminders across the land, like the Red Fort in Delhi, not far from where Martha and I have lived, or Humayun's tomb, typical of the forts, the palaces, and the tombs of that era. In Delhi, we also have the great Jama Masjid, one of the largest mosques of the Muslims in the world, and not too far away, the Birla Temple, typical of the tens of thousands of temples and shrines across the land. And these tell us that India is the land of the Hindus. It is a land where much of work is still done by hand, and the women of thousands of villages go every morning to the well and draw the water and carry it back to their homes in the water pots. It is a land where the food for 700 million people is grown principally by the power of the oxen pulling the wooden plow to break up the soil. It is a land where the ox cart is still the principal vehicle of the villages. But though India is a land of the ox cart, it is a land of modern changes as well. 65 airports in India, many of them too small because air travel expands in India as in other parts of the world. India is a land of gigantic cities, along the edges of which there are the kind of slums and poverty that you of this part of the world can scarcely visualize. In cities like Calcutta and Bombay, the many thousands there are for whom there is no place to live, other than that which can be prepared from scraps of this or that, to protect from the wind, the rain, and the sun. But though India is a land of the ancient things, there arise in that nation today the smokestacks of modern industry, as that nation very rapidly develops into one of the major industrial nations of the world, sending manufactured goods in every direction, including to the United States itself. India is a land where Christianity has been for nearly 2,000 years. Go to the city of Madras, admire this beautiful cathedral, go on inside and take a look around and talk with some of the people there. They tell us that soon after the death of Jesus Christ, one of his disciples, Thomas, made his way along the trade routes from Palestine to India, and there, by his teaching and preaching, established the Maratoma Church, which has existed for these centuries since. Go down to the front of the church and find what is, according to their traditions, the tomb of one of the disciples of Jesus, Thomas himself. It's now more than 18 years ago that the church asked Martha and me to move to the city of Delhi to open a new program of the United Methodist Committee on Relief in concern for the poor. Here, the house in which we lived, behind us our Indian-made car. Come on inside the house to one of the rooms which was my office, where I carried on correspondence with many kinds of projects. And the base of my travels as your Methodist representative to all parts of India, out of concern for those things related to the welfare of the poor. I'd like to take you way down into South India, the land of tens of thousands of palm trees, interspersed by the lovely carpeted rice fields, made level because of the need for irrigation water. I'd like to take you along a country road from the city of Mangalore out to some of the villages. Some months before my wife and I left India, our younger son Max, who of course was born and grew up in India but now lives in America, came back for a last visit with us before we were to leave. He had never been into South India before, so he went with me on this particular trip and took the pictures which you are now seeing. Of course, Max had come from the land of Pepsi-Colas and Coca-Colas. He didn't think too much of the palm tree in South India as a source of refreshments, but we hadn't been down there long until Max began to look forward to those times we could stop along the side of the road, chop off the end of a green coconut, and enjoy the refreshing of green coconut water. We go along the country road and we finally come to a particular village where low-caste people have lived in their houses of mud walls and grass roofs for generations past, carrying on their livelihood with simple kinds of handicrafts. We find a woman with a heavy mallet in her hand, beating the hull of a coconut to get from the hull the fiber that is useful for making rope. And after she has beaten the fiber out of the hull, we find another one of the women with some of the fiber there behind her making rope. We watch in surprise as we see the skill of her hands and fingers cause the fiber of the coconut to become a piece of rope. And in just a few moments, she shows us little samples of how she does it. Of course, she makes much longer and heavier rope than these little samples, and once a week she takes them to the market and sells to make her living. Important in the life of the village is a drum. Here we find the young carpenter starting to make a drum from a part of the log of a tree. He chisels away from the outer part and then very slowly from the inner part until finally he reduces it to a very thin, perfect circle body of a drum, over the ends of which the leather is stretched. And it's a great experience to be in the villages at night and hear the beating of the drums, the singing and the dancing, which is village entertainment. We find another one of the men with some of the stems of the palm trees, cutting them into strips and using those strips to weave into baskets that are strong and useful in village life. He also, once a week, takes his to the baskets to the market to sell and make his living. Some time ago, the church in that area, the Church of South India, said, "What could we do to really change the way of life of the poor in a village like this?" They started out with a housing project, with some money they could get from the state government, some that they could borrow from the bank. With their own labor and money from you Methodists in America, the houses began to take shape. They're two-room houses with a veranda in front and a cooking place in the back. They don't look like very much to Americans, but they're the kind of house these people could not have dreamed of having before. After the building of the houses, there came the building of the workshop, where the people could come together to do their handicraft work and then cooperatively market the products of their hands to make a better living. Basic to the need of the village, of course, is a well. With the labor of the people and money from Methodists in America, the well was constructed. Typical of hundreds of such wells across the land, made possible by your program of Wells for Villages. And then there came sewing classes with mechanical means. The women and the girls learn very rapidly, and then some of them, like this one, are able to get a loan from the bank, buy a sewing machine, and earn money from it. We move about in the village. We look into the faces of the children there, realizing that we are seeking to alter their ways of life. Then I like to take you to Hyderabad, to a remarkable project of our church. It's called the Water Development Society. It is a program built around the drilling of wells in villages, the actual manufacturing of drilling rigs, and agricultural development in 30 villages of the area. First of all, I'd like to take you to the factory itself, and there we meet my friend and colleague of some years, Mr. Chilappa, the managing director of the factory. And in front we see some of the large Indian-made trucks that are waiting there to have the drilling rigs mounted on them. We see the office block of the factory, and Mr. Chilappa invites us to come on in and look around. We visit the many departments, among which we find ourselves in a very large room with many noisy machines, turning out of fine steel the components of modern drilling rigs. And we find young men who have learned their trade there on the spot in this remarkable Christian industrial enterprise, as concerned for the welfare of the workers as for the product of the assembly lines. In the yard outside, we find some of the smaller kinds of drilling rigs that are manufactured there on the spot, the kind that can easily be transported from one village to another. And we also find the larger rigs, the kind that can drill a 6.5-inch hole 450 feet deep into the hard rock of the earth to find water. Let us go with one of these rigs to the village. It's a great experience to stand by the side of one of them as the earth trembles beneath our feet under its power. And that same power sends the steel bit of the rig, foot by foot, down into the hard rock of the earth to find water. And when water is finally struck, the compressed air of the machine shoots the water out of the ground to indicate that we have had success. Then Mr. Chilapa invites us to come and go about 30 miles out from Hyderabad to Ibrahimpatan, the Rural Development Center of the Water Development Society. Here, some of the buildings of the center, we go inside. Mr. Chilapa gives us some refreshments as he tells us about his work. He says they employ some 300 people in the factory, another 160 people in the drilling program in the villages, and here at the rural center and the area, 40 full-time paid workers. All of this made possible by this remarkable Christian industrial enterprise using all of its profits for the welfare of the poor, managed by a Christian dedicated layman of the Methodist Church, Mr. Chilapa, who not only is active in his local church, but considers this as a part of his lay ministry in the name of Jesus Christ on behalf of the poor of his area. There at the Rural Center, one of the projects has to do with animal husbandry. In cooperation with other organizations, we have imported into India large numbers of Jersey cattle from Australia to be placed in various parts of the country, some of which have come here to Ibrahimpatan and are used in a crossbreeding program to provide for the farmers of the area a crossbred animal that can produce 5 or 6 times as much milk as the animals they have traditionally used. Sometimes the girls from the university in Hyderabad come out to the rural center to spend a week or 2 weeks working directly with village people as a part of their education. And when the girls come, they live in the dormitory of the rural center, sleeping on the floor, on the mats that you see here, and doing their own cooking. The time that my son and I and some other guests went, the girls invited us to stay and have lunch. They fed us lunch on disposable plates. Not the kind you know of here, but plates made out of leaves, fastened together with little splinters of wood. At which time we find our son Max, in typical village fashion, seated on the floor, eating the wonderful food of South India with fingers from the leaf plates. After the meal is over, Mr. Chilapa invites us to come and get into the bus and go further into the countryside to a village that is expecting. And because they were expecting us, the whole village turns out in welcome because of the kind of things the Water Development Society is doing there. One of which was the building of a 2-room schoolhouse for education for the children, of course, but also for evening classes in adult literacy, for classes in mother and child care, nutrition, sewing, and other things important in village life. We visit another one of the 10 school buildings that were built during this particular effort. It was in this that you Methodists in America had your part to play by giving your gifts through our office to the Society for the 10 school buildings. In this one, we see one of the university girls down there in front talking with the children, and we join with what is going on. We look into the faces of these bright, keen, earnest children, interested in what is going on. And very quickly, our minds tell us of the modernizing changes swirling about in their village and in their nation, hoping that these changes will mean for them a future that is better than the past of their parents. Then I'd like to take you not too far from the city of Madras to one of the largest mission hospitals in the world. It's called the Vellore Medical College and Hospital. Some time ago, that hospital started a new department called the Rural Unit for Health and Social Affairs. We call it RUSA. RUSA is an effort to take health services into the villages accompanied by a comprehensive rural development program. So let us go to Rusa. And there we meet Dr. Mukherjee, who is in charge. It was my custom in recent years to go as your Methodist representative a couple of times a year to Rusa. I would talk with Dr. Mukherjee about the work going on there, and we would decide the things for which your Methodist money could be used in that work. Dr. Mukherjee invites us to come and look around. Nearby, he shows us traditional agriculture with the oxen pulling the wooden plow to get the fields ready for rice transplanting. And when the fields are ready, we find the people going into them and beginning to push down into the water in the soft mud the tens of thousands of little rice seedlings to begin their crop of another year. And as they work, we realize the importance of hand labor in that part of the world. But as I reminded you before of modernizing changes in India, mechanical means are of growing importance in Indian agriculture. And therefore at Rusa, we have the mechanical things like the two-wheel tractor that can pull the trailer, or that can pull the plow, or the thrashing machine that helps the farmer to speed up his harvest and make a better living, or the portable irrigation sets that help the farmer in those seasons when the rain might not be sufficient. It was in this that you Methodists in America with your gifts provided the money to Rusa for the mechanical things, in the same way that we have provided such mechanical equipment to many other agricultural projects across the land in our concerns for the development of Indian agriculture and the production of more food for mankind. These are silkworms. They are an important part of a growing industry in South India. And therefore at Rusa we have the Department of Silkworm Culture, and we go there. We find the many large trays in which there are the thousands of little silkworms eating on the tender mulberry leaves that they may grow into adulthood. And when the worms are fully grown, the large worms then are put in rather strange contraptions where each worm has room to itself. And there the worms begin to spin their cocoons. Now, a cocoon consists of one single thread wound around and around and around until the worm is enclosed inside. It is possible with a remarkable technology to unwind the thread of each of those cocoons and to use it with thousands of other threads to become the basis of beautiful silk cloth for the women of the world. So the effort at Rusa is to help the farmers to produce more and better cocoons to take to the market where they are sold at auction, and away they go to the silk mills. I know you would love to see some of the beautiful cloth. You could come to our city of Delhi at Christmas time and hear the Delhi Christian Chorus singing the Christmas music for the people of that great city. And as the chorus sings, we realize that many of the women are dressed in the beautiful silk saris of India, made possible by the silkworm and the growing industry there. The energy crisis of mankind. How do you find sufficient fuel to cook the food every day for 700 million people? That problem is causing our forests to disappear and our hillsides to be denuded in the ever-increasing search for fuel. Therefore, at my office, or our UMCOR office, and RUSA and other such agencies take a keen interest in the biogas demonstration program, whereby we can use a generator like this to generate from cow manure and other waste products of the village modern cooking gas. We go into a village home. We find a woman with a tiny 2-burner gas unit there on the little platform beneath her, having the unbelievable experience of cooking in her home with modern cooking gas. The philosophy of the work. Go to the people, live among them, love them. Start with what they know, build on what they have. But of the best leaders, when their task is accomplished, their work is done, the people all remark, "We have done it ourselves." Now very quickly I'd like to take you back to Delhi, where Martha and I lived those recent years. A place in the world where international tourists like to go to see the ancient things, of course. It's not uncommon in Delhi to find 20 or 30 parrots in a tree, representative of the wonderful bird life of India. Not uncommon to find an elephant walking along the street and no one paying any special attention. In Delhi, I go to one of the little shops to buy some things we need at home, and Martha goes to the market to buy some eggs. As missionaries, we carry on our everyday life there, as you do yours here, with our work, our shopping, our social life. Our church home is the Centenary Methodist Church, and in front of the church you find the ever-present leprosy patient beggars, of whom there are hundreds of thousands in India, using the only way they know to get some coins to keep body and soul together. I mentioned the visit of our son. When he came to Delhi, we went as usual to church on Sunday morning, and that morning at church we met Dr. Miss Sarah Kashiram, the one on the right, one of the outstanding Methodist women leaders in India, in charge of one of our large schools made possible by the United Methodist Women here in America. But years before, Sarah had lived in the little village in the central part of India where we Marbles lived, and we had all worked together in the mission school there. And so when we got together, we talked of old times. And as we did so, Max and I decided that he and I would go south again, down into the central part of India to the little village where we used to live, leaving the city of Delhi up in the north and going by railway to our village of Baihar. We got on the big train in Delhi to go a day and a night's journey south to the city of Jabalpur, where there we transferred to a smaller train, a little train on which we have spent many days of our lives, coming and going in the heartland of India. It is a train whose little tracks are only 2.5 feet apart. We get in the train to go south. It takes us up and down and around the hills, and finally brings us into that wonderful heartland of India with its vast jungles and hills, amidst which flow clearly the streams after the monsoon season. And interspersed across the countryside, the quiet villages of the tribal people carrying on their traditional life. And in the vast jungles, the wonderful wildlife of India, the tigers, the leopards, the hyena, the bear, the deer, the monkeys, the peacocks, and all of the rest. The little train delivers us at the village railway station, and we transfer again, this time to our 25-year-old Jeep that somehow still manages to run. It takes us 32 miles further up into the hills, and finally at evening time we come to our village of Baihar. The school children knew we were coming, so they turned out with singing and dancing to welcome us back home. It was back in the year 1945 that Martha and I, as a young couple from the churches in America, went to have those wonderful years in that part of the world. We went because there were congregations here in America willing to underwrite the partial support of a missionary couple, in the same way that any United Methodist Church in America today may have a covenant relationship with a missionary in some part of the world by contributing a part of their support. For 21 years we lived in the little village, and this is downtown where we find Martha in front of the grocery store with our very friendly Hindu groceryman. He would send us a bill once every 3 or 4 months when he got around to it. The grocery store, the hardware shop, the barber shop, the cloth market, the places where we got the things we needed in everyday life. Martha and I felt that the village was a wonderful place to raise our family, Bill and Max. They grew up to love the village. They loved India. They loved being a part of a missionary family, a part of the mission of the church in a far part of the world. There in the village we had our mission school. Village children would leave their homes and come for 9 months of the year to live right there in the mission school. And so we had a wonderful opportunity to influence the lives of growing children. But the heart of the work was the church. And many years before, British missionaries had built for us this lovely church in Baihar. And there it was on Christmas Day that Max and I went on our visit. In front of the church we met many of those people that we had known years before. And I was a very happy missionary father as our son stood in the pulpit that day and preached the Christmas sermon in the language in which he had grown up in as a boy, Hindi, the language of the people. After the service was over, we got into the old Jeep to visit some of the other churches of the area. Here, a tiny mud wall church with the congregation seated on the floor, and I am baptizing a child. Our glance moves around the room. We see the typical child that lives in these quiet villages and goes away to the mission for an education in the school and the Christian life in the church and the Sunday school. We visit another one of the churches, one that was built small when we were there and then expanded, but it was too small to hold those who wanted to get in for the Christmas service. After the service, the pastor invited us into his home for Christmas dinner. And we had it in typical village fashion, seated on the floor, eating the food with our fingers. At the close of our visit to the area, Max and I went to this particular little Methodist church located in a manganese mining camp. We had our service of worship, after which a young man stood up. His name is Emmanuel because many of our people adopt biblical names. Emmanuel said, "Long ago, I was a child orphan laborer here in the mines." He said, "I could earn maybe a nickel a day, enough to eat once a day. Other children were going away to the mission school, and some said that I should go, and I went. I spent the formative years of my childhood in the school for an education, and the church and the Sunday school for the Christian way of life. And I have come back. Long ago," he said, "I was nobody. Now with my education and a better job in the mines, I am somebody." He paused, and then he looked at the congregation seated there, and he said, "This is our story. Our mothers and fathers could neither read nor write. Many of us went away to the mission for an education in the school, and the Christian way of life in the church, in the Sunday school, and we have come back. Life for us," he said, "is good. It is good because the mission came." After the service was over, I asked some of the people to come out in front for a picture. Most of these young men now have children of their own, but years ago these were the little boys when we were there, and these are mothers now with families of their own, but in those years these were the little girls when we were there. In those years you people would send to us $75 a year to support and educate a child. Now many of us missionaries have come away. The things that we did as foreign missionaries then are done now by our Indian colleagues as a part of the life of the church there. The schools, the churches, the colleges, the hospitals, all of these things we did, they now do. But all of these things take place in the life of a church that is poor. It costs $150 a year now to support and educate a child. They continue to need and request from you in America financial aid for all of these kinds of things. Many individuals and churches here in America send through the board in New York advance specials gifts to make these kinds of things a continuing possibility. As they do so, it represents the continuing responsibility of many Christians and Methodists in this part of the world who have been blessed by God in so many ways to continue to be a part of the lives of people in developing parts of the world in the name of Jesus Christ. My son and I came away from that wonderful experience with these our friends, realizing that we went to India not out of concern for drilling rigs and wells and buildings and all of that, but that we went to India because there was one who told us to go into all the world and tell mankind about a better life on this earth, yes, and about a better eternity as well. Thank you.